Never seen a smile so big on my little old lady's face until I tell her I'm going fishing all weekend. Pack up all of my bacon, I make plans for 7:45, and I swing around, pick up my date for the weekend. Some reason she seems to please when I'm leaving. There's something I'm missing when I'm gone fishing. When I'm gone fishing. When I'm gone fishing.
Well, good evening. Sorry, guys and gals, that we're a little bit late, but as always, the conversations before we go live are far more interesting. I'll let you know. And here's a quick little survey for all of you to sort of join in. We were having a bit of a heated discussion before we went live. If there was a pod of orcas and one of us four were on a patch of ice, a small patch of ice, the debate was, would that pod of orcas work harder to get myself, Jim, Jason, or Lawrence off for food, for feeding time? So there was a lot of discrepancy, and people didn't necessarily agree with some of the answers, but unfortunately, I think I have them all beat, because I'll tell you, any wild animal that takes a look at me in the wild is going to realize that he's not going to have to, he or she is not going to have to eat for couple months. So I said they'd try harder to get me off the ice, but what do you guys think? Anyway, sorry, you or Jim. Yes, man. How you doing, buddy? Mike Howard's in the house. James Shebber, yeah, baby. Sally and Bear are in Winnipeg. Wow, that sort of starts us off with the first bit in terms of the introduction. Bit of a nip in the air, eh? Holy smokes, man. I know the folks out west. Walter, if you're watching, I know you guys got snow out in Saskatchewan. I think it snowed in Manitoba as well, but holy smokes, it appears that fall is here. Winter is just around the corner. I know it's a scary word. Nobody wants to talk about it just yet, but some folks, they prefer their hard ice or their hard water and ice fishing more so than the open water. So for those who are looking forward to the season starting, it seems like it's possibly just around the corner. But yeah, absolutely. What a change in weather. Tonight's topic, as you know, is panfish. We're going to be talking about panfish. And it seems as if with these cooler temps that, perhaps they are starting to migrate towards their wintry home. I'm going to ask the panel, when is it easier to catch panfish, just after spawn or in the fall, or is there no difference at all? So I'll be interested to hear what they have to say. And if you do have any questions, get them ready, because when the panel does come up, fire away. More questions, the better. Just wanted to let you guys know the CFN Serena Shaw Slush Fund is wrapping up. Thanks to everyone who has already paid. We just have a few outstanding. And of course, those donors, you generous donors, holy smokes, man. I don't know how many people I was talking about on the weekend, and they just could not believe the level of generosity that came forth for this. But I just wanted to let everyone know, if you have purchased or made a bid that was a winning one, and you haven't heard from your donor, please reach out to me. The donors did want me to say to everyone that I wasn't to start a chat group until all the money was collected. So if you haven't heard yet, that's probably why. But as I said, there's only like 3 or 4 outstanding. So thanks to everyone. It's been very seamless and easy, and really appreciate the work that went into it. Yes, and also the fall brawl. Now, Mike has a very busy schedule this week, so I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that Mike will be joining me tomorrow to wrap up the remainder of the fall brawl prizes. So stay tuned to that. If not, we will definitely get it sometime this week. But as I said, I know Mike's been really busy, so I'm not 100% sure if he's got it all done. On a good note, I want to wish our good buddy Moose the happiest of birthdays. He had extravaganza that Shannon, his girlfriend, put on Saturday. Would have loved to have gone, but unfortunately I couldn't make it. But it looked like a really good time. So if everyone could put in the comments, happy birthday, Moose. That'd be really appreciative. Hey, Corey, what's up? Gortras, someone say panfish? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So yes, happy birthday again to Moose. CFN retreat. Just to give you folks an update, as it is right now, we potentially have 3 retreats happening next year. So I want just to let you guys know, and gals, where we're at. So our Western retreat is in July. It's July 10th to 16th. If you want to know more about it, contact Walter. But that'll be our first one of the year, and that's out in Saskatchewan. It sounds like a fantastic place. Walter was on here a couple Mondays ago discussing it, but it looks as if they've got 4 cabins that are full so far. I don't know what full occupancy is, but 4 cabins is a great start. But in terms of numbers, we're not 100% sure where the numbers are at. But if you are interested, as I said, get in touch with Walter. He'll give you all the information you possibly need. And then, of course, we have the Horwood CFN retreat, our 4th annual CFN retreat, which is August 15th to 20th. Warren and Doris wanted me to mention to you folks that if you are thinking of coming next year, they're half full right now. So make sure you don't delay in getting booked. We are definitely going to be doing some more promotion very soon in regards to getting that advertised. But yeah, they're at almost half capacity right now. We're looking to sell the place out next year. So if you can, it's a bit of a drive for folks down this far south, but I'll tell you, it's well worth it. Anybody that has gone will tell you the same. It is well worth it. It's a lot of fun. And man, I'll tell you, if you like eating fish, this is your place. Now, the third one is right now up in the air, but the owners of Camp McIntosh have thrown a date at me for Thanksgiving, Canadian Thanksgiving next year. That weekend was potentially going to be our third. It's a lot further south. It's closer to, I would say, the majority of our CFN membership and following. It is Georgian Bay. It's right at the mouth of the French River where it empties into Georgian Bay. It is a spectacular location. As I said, Andre and our good friend Tracy do a fantastic job as hosts. And as I said, I don't think we're going to go hungry when it comes to fish there either. So we're throwing it around. It's an idea, but as I said, potentially our third retreat could be at Camp McIntosh. So stay tuned to that. We're going to be putting a post up just to get an idea of what the numbers are, or at least I don't know, get an idea of who's thinking of going, so that we can present that to Andre and Tracy. We'll make that post very, very shortly. But in the meantime, keep that in mind. Thanksgiving weekend of next year. Last and not least, but this is the most important, because this is what everyone loves about CFN, and I love giving stuff away. The owner of North Shore Tackle has asked me to create a contest, and it will be with the start of steelhead season just around the corner. It is going to be geared towards steelhead. At least the prize pack will be. In order to qualify, it's really simple. We're going to post it tomorrow because it's Trout Tuesday. All we basically need is a picture or a video with North Shore in it. So, for instance, if you don't have any North Shore Tackle products, you can do something like this. Whether it be swag, in this case, Yakman's got a hoodie on, North Shore Tackle hoodie on, or our beloved Eric Bueller, who has the North Shore Tackle hat on, holding a fish. Or you can be creative and come up with something like so. You know, you can watermark or do whatever with some pics, as long as the North Shore Tackle logo is in it, as well as a product. So those are the two things that are required. Either it has to have the actual product in it or the logo. But needless to say, this is a big shout out. Thank you to North Shore. And just to let you know that everyone that sent in a thank you at the CFN retreat has already qualified. You all get one ballot. I'm going to be posting that video at the end of our live, so everyone knows that perhaps maybe they don't remember doing a thank you video, but we're going to play it at the end. And all those who are in it have already qualified with one ballot. Are you only allowed one ballot? Absolutely not. If you have multiple products or multiple swag, by all means, make sure you post as many as you possibly can. There is no limit to how many ballots you can have. The more ballots on the wheel, the better chance you have to win the North Shore Tackle prize pack. So stay tuned tomorrow for that. We'll be launching that tomorrow. It will run till November 16th. And as I say, videos are great. Videos are awesome, but a pick will do it as well. Either pick or video, and it is equal to one ballot. Those are all the announcements I have from my end. Happy birthday, Moose. Yeah, happy birthday, Moose. Thanks, guys, for doing that. Oh, Doris. Yes, absolutely. Happy birthday, Doris. I believe it was your birthday yesterday. I saw in my timeline. Yes, Doris, happy birthday from all of us. But in the meantime, as I said, if you are thinking of coming to the CFN retreat at Horwood Lake Lodge, make sure you reach out to Horwood Lake Lodge and get your bed booked. Because as I said, right now they're at half capacity. But in the meantime, we'll be putting together a post so anybody who is interested can join on and ask some of those who have already been. It's a great time. It's a good time. Anyway, without further ado, as I said, the topic tonight is panfish. There is perch at Horwood. It is, I wouldn't say it's known for its panfish, but you can certainly get perch there. It's more known for its walleye, pike, and of course, smallmouth bass. Anyway, we will bring up Jim, but before we do, here's a word from our sponsor. Big Jim's in.
You there?
How you doing?
How you doing?
How you doing?
I'm doing okay. I got no complaints.
Attaboy. Well,
Doesn't do any good anyway. I can only
you're in the right place if you do.
I can only stay for about 2 minutes now. I have to go.
Oh.
Yeah, sorry. I got to get to work because I heard the propane guy filling the tank up.
Oh. Okay. I hear you. What is that? You get that filled what? Twice a year, maybe, Jim? 3 times a year?
Well, there's 2 big tanks. It's I don't know. It's probably 5 times.
5 times. Wow.
Yeah.
Right on. Yeah, it's getting
That's
expensive.
the problem when you have a big house, eh? Like the hydro bill's $400, $450 a month.
Oof.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, Jim, I know you hate talking about yesteryear, like you're the only one that sort of came from that era. You're not, but the wealth of information you have that we're privy to is something that, unfortunately, as much as it sounds like I'm, fanning the flames or pumping your tires, it's true.
Yeah, but it's coming from Mr. Killer Whale Bait.
Yeah. Well, as I said, it would be maybe a toss-up right now between you and I, but I think you're a little bit more agile than I am. Panfish. It's like typically, traditionally, it is your go-to fish if you want to get kids involved in angling.
Yep.
Very straightforward and simple. Hook, bobber, and a worm. It never fails. Always seems to produce. Jim, when was it that tackle started to evolve where presentations would change for panfish? Because traditionally it's always been a hook and a bobber,
You
but
know,
it's now
Scotty,
evolving.
yeah, probably about the same time that crappie fishing took off and ice fishing. They're sort of all kind of lumped together, and a lot of the stuff that you put on the obviously you use ice fishing rods and whatever, but it's I just think it's really important that if you're going to fish for panfish, that once again you have the right orca appetizer. I am now.
Yeah.
You like that, Richard?
Yeah, baby.
Keep that
Yes.
baby clean.
Yes, sir.
So, I actually have a shelf here where I have about 20 hats on it, so that's why I always because I used to always get in the back room here. I'd sit down, had to put the phone. We used to use the phone at first until I discovered it was way better on the computer, Joe. And I'd always get back here and go, "Oh my God, I don't have a hat!" And I freak, eh? So it's all good though. It's all good. But yeah, when people got into it, I mean, everybody went out there and all they threw. I went out, when my panfish box for pan fishing, that's it right there.
Makes sense.
One plain old box. There's everything in there. There's bobber stops, extra line. Got to have these Canadian company.
Right on.
All the little crankbaits, little tubes for crappie, and I got stuff that's so much smaller than that too. And that's really what you got to do a lot of the times. Like one of my favorites is these little guys. They're called atomic teasers. They're made by Powerbait.
Nice.
They're really, really cool. Probably the one I everybody thinks their favorite thing is that, even when you had great days. And I remember having a spring where I used these Lindy What's It things.
Yeah.
And you can here, I got one out here loose. This is I took off a rod a couple of years ago and it's been kicking around. You can see they're pretty small still.
Right.
But they're just, you know me, I like things that wiggle and jiggle. There's so many people getting involved in it now. You got Jamie there from True North Baits, sent me up a couple of little packs of stuff here. You can see it. But
nice.
These little weenie ones like this, stuff. You can see how small it is when you put your finger beside it. It's these little things that they get in their mouth. If you use something bigger, panfish are really ravenous. They'll try to eat anything. And on some days with the bigger ones, it works. There's no ifs, ands, ors, or buts. But I saw days last year where I had the crappies behind the house here just stacked. Well, there goes the propane truck. I got to go. No. And that was the deal.
Wow.
Now you can see how small that is.
That's miniature. Wow.
So I would put this little dude by them. They wouldn't touch it.
Right.
It was just too much there. Too much going on. And this little critter right here, I think it's a Northland mimic minnow, but you can see how skinny and small it is.
Yeah.
It's minute. And it's so small that, a slip bobber is a tool of a panfish angler. I see guys come down, they want to fish for panfish, they got the right lure, and they get a bobber about the size of my head, a red and white bobber, and it's like, it looks more like a beer cooler bobber thing they used to have, and they hook that out on their line, and then you watch that thing going up and down all day. There isn't a bass out there that could pull half these bobbers under, let alone a panfish, But it's one of those things where you really have to be prepared if you want it to work with you. Like I'm saying, like 5 pound braid to a fluorocarbon leader in a lot of cases. You can even use less. You can use 2 pound ice fishing braid, the Power Pro braid. Oh my God, I thought I had a spool of that kicking around. I did for a while. I think I put it on one of my panfish reels about a week ago. But just having the right stuff, the really light line, the really light rod. You got to have a rod that's got an extra fast tip. You don't need much backbone. These fish are not that big. Like I'm using rods. I use one of the rods that I use that I love is the original fluff rod, the X Bride. I think it's a 230. It's a medium light or even a light. No, it's a 270. It's a light, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful rod. Mind, it's a fairly hefty price tag on it too.
Can
but
imagine.
it makes the fish just feel so much bigger, although you're still in control easily. But
Yeah.
there's it's something I've always wanted to do, is to go to a place like Bass Pro Shops down south and go through the panfish section and pick out a rod and say, here, make me a like an X Pride or an NRX, just like this,
Yeah.
that would mimic the action, just so you get the ultimate feel and things like that. But that's only having the right equipment is part of the game. But you also got to be in the right place at the right time. Like everybody fishes for panfish in the spring. That's when they do it. Why? Because they all swim up in the shallow water when it gets warm, and they're easy to catch. They're right there. They're ravenous. They're just about to start the big feeding binge for the summer, and like they're really easy to catch. So over the summer it gets a little harder. They act like other fish. A lot of them go into really really deep water. I showed you that picture a minute ago. Here, I'll pop it up again. I had. We were fishing for smallmouths with Fergies,
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and I caught a couple of pumpkin seeds that were like, they were probably 9-10 inches. And I thought, wow, what happens if you put a little jig down there? Well, here's what happens when you put a little jig down. You can see the size of those things, the shoulders on them, the fat hanging on them. They're both Ontario records. They were kept. We were talking about catching fish deep. I'm not going to sit and fish for a school of pumpkin seeds in 35, 40 feet of water and kill them, because they were right on the bottom.
Right.
And they're down there eating all the little bloodworms and the insects in the bottom. The smallmouths are down 15 or 20 feet eating all the bait fish over top of them. But once you went right through the smallmouths and down at the bottom, you would see these groups of fish. And I saw these fish. I went and looked at them several times. And I never put a line back because I wasn't going to kill 10, 11, 11 and a half, almost 12-inch pumpkin seeds just for fun, just to catch.
It makes.
And I'm like that with the smallmouths too. I think guys call me up. You've heard me talk about it. I caught them out of 45 feet of water today. Well, I fizzed them. Yeah, but a lot of those fish still die. And, that's part of the deal. And, panfish, they, like as I learned from Jason here a few minutes ago, about the males being more important to guard nests with panfish, because I guess they put out a ridiculous amount of eggs. Like, it's just ridiculous the amount of eggs. So they really need the males more to protect the nest, to keep the population up. Because if you go into a really good bluegill lake, pumpkin seeds, like a panfish type, a lake that has a good population of panfish, there's got to be a ton of insects. That's the one thing. You have to have those muddy, sticky bottoms, as they call them. There's got to be a ton of insect life. That's what they eat. That's really what they live on, and plankton and stuff like that. But you go into a lake that has a really good population, they've never been fished, especially small lakes, and it happens in them. You keep them. You keep them a couple of times. You will never see the fishing as good in that specific area again. Never. Your first trip there, whether they're biting or not, will be your best. There's something about it. I don't know. I can't put my finger on it. I've talked to Brian Brosdahl about it. I've talked to Dave Gens about it. There's two guys that have forgotten more about panfish than anybody in this country will ever know. You know what I'm saying? And they often talk about that, how they just don't like to keep big fish. If you're going to keep them, it's 8 inches, maybe 9s at the most. But you have to look at the area you're in. If you're in an area that consistently puts out 10-inch bluegills, keeping some 8s and 9s isn't the worst thing in the world. If you've never seen a 9, and you have to remember, you have to put a fish on a ruler to tell somebody it's 10 inches. Because I'll guarantee you, if you take their fish after they say it's 10 inches or 11 inches, and you put it on a ruler, you're going to see that it's really 9 and 2/3, or, it's just like all the 6-pound bass. You put them on a scale, and your scale's broken. I weighed it in the boat. It was, it doesn't work like that. It's when they're like that. But they're wondrous fish. They're a great source of food. Like, they're really good to eat. If you do it right, there's no real impact. In the springtime, it's definitely shallow. The summer, unless you really get onto it. Like, I have a couple of buddies that are crackerjacks. Sebastian Kowalchuk is one guy. That guy is a crackerjack. He learned how to catch them in the summertime,
Wow.
and he does it. And a lot of these fish can be had. But then, see, at this time of the year now, when it gets later, it comes back to that same old thing. These fish love to be near weeds. They love to be near soft bottom. You can't have weeds without a soft bottom. So they stack up in the areas just before, about the time it is now. Now, this is a bad example this year. This is a little bit of an anomaly. There's no doubt about that. I mean, we haven't had a frost here yet. We don't show a frost here until almost the last day of October, possibly.
Which is remarkable considering last year.
And that's got nothing to do with global warming. This
Don't even. Yeah, let's not. We won't even start on that, Jim. But
it's just one of those weird things because I called a buddy of mine that works at the airport and I said, "Hey, are we breaking any records for the warmest nights?" And he said, "Oh, not even close." I rest my case.
There you go.
He just punches it up in the computer and boom, So there's been nights a lot warmer, apparently all the nights have been a lot warmer because we haven't broken any lows. So it's one of those things. But they stack up at those green weeds in front of a basin, and it comes back down to that same old thing I told you. And Brian Brosdahl summed it up that time. Face the weed line, put your back to the deepest spot that's close to those weeds. That's where the fish are going to stack up, and it's amazing. It's not just the panfish. You'll catch largemouths there. You'll catch all kinds of fish, and they just drop off into that deep water. And then in the springtime, you hear us talk about it. They come up, they go back and forth. They go back and forth a few times. The same in the fall. They go back and forth, but they're heading the opposite direction. And then in the wintertime, you catch them in the basin, like a lot of times in the deeper water. So it's really, they're really fun. It's like anything else. There's a way to do it and a way not to. And, when you do it right, you'll be successful. It's so much fun. It's crazy. And you probably have a lot of the stuff, like I said to you about the 5-pound test line, you've got, panfish stuff for the winter. I know guys that go out and fish in the fall over the side of the boat for crappies with 48-inch ice fishing rods.
Yeah, 100%.
That place, yeah. But a lot of one of my favorites and the little things that I showed you is little crankbaits because it just allows you to cover a lot of water. These things are about 1 2/3 long. They're just absolutely amazing. And once you find them, you have to look for them. So once you find them, you can use a little jig spinner, but a teeny one, just really, really small stuff. But then once you find them, a slip bobber, or just swimming those little jigs through. And that's what I was going to mention. When you get into fishing with these teeny little things like this, quite often it's not heavy enough to pull the line through the slip bobber. So what you want to do is you want to put a split shot about 15 inches up the line. So the split shot itself pulls it through, but your jig is actually down below it. So it allows you to fish it. But slip bobbers, a weighted slip bobber, is the one that has the little piece of lead on the bottom here. And what that does is it keeps it upright all the time.
Right.
Because if you use it without the lead, what happens is when the jig isn't always heavy enough to pull it up straight. And the other thing is too, like a lot of times it'll lay on the surface like this. And I know people that do that because when you get a bite, what does the bobber do?
Lifts up. Yeah.
It kicks up. So there's two ways to look at it. But I just really settled on the weighted ones years ago, and they seem to work the best. And they don't have to be big. You can see that's probably 3 1/4 inches or so.
Yeah.
Just little ones like that. And if you got younger ones fishing with you, a slip bobber is so much easier to use because when they reel it up, they don't have 4 feet of line, or you might be fishing them at 8 feet. So you got your bobber stop could be 8 feet up the line. And for a kid to try to throw a bobber with 8 feet of line and a jig on the end, that's not happening. I'd have a rough time doing that.
Yeah, true enough.
Yeah.
You mentioned that they're a little bit easier to catch in the spring than this time of year.
It's just that they're right in front of you, and they're they've just come out of the cold. They're shallow, which makes it so much easier when they're shallow when you see them. But it doesn't mean that they're going to bite. It doesn't mean that they're going to bite, and that's a lot of people never figure that out.
I wanted to ask you this. This is in order to better the odds of them biting. A lot of folks have said that when it comes to panfish, when you get a collection of them where they're being very competitive at the feeding, that's going on. You want numbers in order to better your chances of catching fish. When you're marking them, you want to see numbers in order to up that competitiveness.
Oh
And
yeah, for sure.
okay.
Yeah,
All
yeah,
right.
for sure. Because when I bring the granddaughters over to the dock in town here, we go over to the dock, and if there's a pile of them there, you drop that slip bobber in the water, and there's one little pumpkin seed nibbling at it there, a little piece of worm. Uh, sometimes you catch them, sometimes you don't. But and then all of a sudden, a couple more come up from under the dock. Then there's about 5 of them there, 10 of them. All of a sudden, 15. You're going to load them up, and I'm shocked, because I fished out here with Dave Chong last Thursday, and the water temperature was still basically 65 degrees.
Incredible.
The panfish were all sitting on the boat launch. I yelled to him, "Watch you don't run over the pumpkin seeds when you launch the boat." He hits the brake. He yells, "Run over what?" I said, "My pumpkin seeds."
Now, are they
They're up in this much
migrating?
water.
Wow. Are they
Because
beginning
it's
to
warm.
migrate now, Jim, to their winter home, or are they still like obviously?
Oh no, they're going to the edge of those weeds.
Right.
They're going out to the edge of the weeds, or they'll stay in real healthy green ones until the water gets really cold. That's what I said to you. I know a lot of guys that fish in the fall for them, and what they're doing in the fall is they want to go fish for them in the fall, because as soon as it freezes, there's a good chance if you go back right where you caught them in the like the beginning of November, they won't be too far away, so it makes it easy to find them. And then once you find them, if you're fishing familiar areas, you can stay on top of them, man. Like they don't move great distances. It's not like they, swim 3 kilometers in an afternoon for something to do away from where they were. They just head toward the deeper water slowly. And I've gone in and looked for them, in 12, 13, 14 feet of water, and I don't see them. I go out to 20, 22, and they're lit up like a Christmas tree. And then you come back to the same spot a couple of days later, and you go out to the deeper water to start, and you drill a hole, and there's nothing there. You go into 14, woof, they're all there. They're right. just doing their thing up and down.
Now, you talked a little bit about live bait. Obviously, worms are very effective. You talk about maggots. Maggots are also there.
Offside.
Yeah. At what point do you switch from your favorite plastics to a live bait presentation when it comes to panfish?
Well, I sort of use it with a lot of that plastic. We use a lot of the small jig heads, like hornet heads and stuff like that. And we just have a couple of maggots on it. I don't even bother with plastic then. But if I'm using some of the little weenie plastic tails, like that little weenie thing I showed you from Northland there, you get something like that down. It never hurts to put a maggot on it. It never hurts.
Right on.
Never hurts. I know I used to laugh. Gen says to me one day, we're sitting fishing in a fish trap together, and he looks and he goes, "Look, a shish kebab." And he's got like 5 maggots hooked in the middle along the shank of the hook, and we're fishing for walleyes. And he drops a jig head with like 5, it had to be, maybe it was even 8 or 10 maggots on it down the hole. And here comes the big red line over. Thunk, gets a 10-pound walleye.
Wow.
Well, we were looking for walleyes. We were in the Bay of Quinte, but it just goes to show you that, that everything eats live bait. It sort of makes it easier. Just with live bait, there's a lot of times, like people come to me and they say to me, well, why don't you use minnows in the lily pads? Well, you can't cast a minnow in the lily pads because it's there for 3 seconds and it's off the hook. It's going to get ripped off. It's going to get torn off. It just makes it a lot harder to fish. Just like guys wanting to put live bait on a bucktail jig to go ripping. Well, what do you do if you want to get something off your hook? You give it a jerk in the water and it comes off. So
exactly.
Stuff like that just it doesn't work. Hey, speaking of ripping, did you see the beasts I made this week? I was working on
the musky. Yes, the musky jigs.
Great big ripping jigs, giant ones.
Wow. Definitely.
I got all the musky guys are calling me.
Definitely, 'tis the season for muskie. That's for sure.
Oh yeah. No, there's no doubt about that. It's there now. But they've been catching them all summer too, so it's
exactly.
Doesn't have to be the fall. Doesn't have to be the fall.
Jim, before you go, we have a bit of an announcement to make for Thursday.
Yeah, Thursday night we're going to get Alex Davis on. He's a young touring professional from Alabama. He's a great guy, fantastic guy. Had some awesome success. He's won a lot of tournaments in the U.S. and he's a real. He lives on Guntersville Lake, and he's a real frog specialist. So if there's anybody out there likes fishing frogs, Here's your chance to talk with a guy that's sort of put the fishing world on its keister with frogs.
Right
He knows how to do it and what to do. I was watching it. Like this guy, besides fishing all the MLF tournaments and stuff like that, he guides about 150 days a year.
Wow. Where does he find the time?
Well, this is it. Hey, it's called being in the business. Eh?
Wow. Incredible.
He's fully involved in it. He's a younger guy. He's pretty spirited. I got to know him when we went to the and it's really funny because I just saw the memories came up about the Shimano Pro Staff Summit that they had in the States a couple of years ago, and we got to go. This is where I met a lot of these guys and got to know them. Right? So
that's awesome.
I hope everybody's out there looking at Just Fishing. You better be.
Yeah, baby. Absolutely.
I have a new program on the computer now, and I can tell who doesn't go there.
Oof.
So, yeah.
Look out. Good. Look out. All right, Jim. Well, listen, look forward to that. Is that Thursday at 8? 7 o'clock. Fantastic. It's Thursday at 7. Jim and I will be hosting yet another fireside chat. And
Scotty will be making up a poster.
I will be making up a poster. You're darn right. Absolutely, buddy.
If the orcas don't get him.
If the orcas don't get me first, you're right. Right on, dude.
Stocking those in the quarry?
Not just yet. No. Not just
yet. Let me know the
day
you go. I want to watch.
Absolutely. Yes, it'll be some entertaining.
Nice orca.
Jim, as always, my friend, thanks so much for joining us. And
take care, kiddies.
Right on, buddy. You take care of yourself.
I will. Take care, bud. Be good.
Okay, bud. All the best. Peace. As always, big pleasure. And he's pretty funny, too. He's a funny guy. Anyway, he did allude to muskie season. So before we bring on Lawrence, here is another word from our sponsor.
As muskie anglers, we all plan, prepare, and are consumed in the pursuit of a trophy muskie. Skix is available with 2-piece saltwater tested tough technology for easy storage in your boat or truck and are designed to handle any muskie lure. You can be assured you're backed by precision Shimano technology. If you fish for skis, you need these.
Well, we're not fishing for skis today. We're fishing for panfish. But yeah, you wouldn't want to take a skis out to hook a bluegill, right?
No, but I got 2 of those this year, and I'm very much enjoying them. We're still going out. And now that the warm weather's finally left, the muskie bite's going to start turning on for real.
Well, it seems like it. We got a couple yet to post from the Ottawa River. You can tell that Lake St. Clair is on, Detroit River is on. So anywhere that there's muskie, I don't know about the Kawarthas, how well the Kawarthas are doing for muskie right now. But even Georgian Bay, we did a post for Camp McIntosh. They're starting to catch some big giants. And as I said, it's that fall nip in the air, right, Lawrence? You feel it? I don't know about you, but this is my favorite time of the year to fish. Again, Jim will attest that they feed all year long. I would never argue that for a second. I just don't understand what it is about the fall bite. But recently, we've been seeing a lot of catches when it comes to panfish. And Lawrence, we were talking a little bit about it in terms of quotas. At the end of the day, do we need to go out and catch 50 perch?
I'm one of my first, I think, memorable experiences going after perch was on a lake in Cape Breton Island called Lake Lac Ainsley. And a buddy of mine, who I know quite well, and he has a little boathouse down there and a cottage up on the mountain. And he took my 3 kids and me out in his little Boston whaler runabout. And we brought some worms and some fishing rods. And we caught, within 30 minutes, we caught 24 perch. And he said, that's good. We're done. So then we went back to the shore, beached his boat, went into the boathouse. And he said, okay, everyone stay in the boathouse, stay at the back of the boathouse. The boathouse is sort of up on the beach about 30, 40 feet from the shore. But what he did in the meantime, he gutted the fish, cut their heads off, and then filleted them and kept the fillets. And then he brought all the heads and guts and put them on the little point at the end of the beach, probably about 100 feet from the boathouse. And then he went back into the boathouse and he goes, now just wait. It takes about 5 minutes. And then sure enough, within 5 minutes, there was at least 15 bald eagles standing there on the beach, eating up the perch heads and the guts like a bunch of seagulls. But these are bald eagles, right? And he said the reason he said if they're all watching him clean these fish, but they're waiting because they go way back, they can see a wide scope of vision. But when they're on the land, they have just a pinhole of vision up close, so they have no idea what's coming up beside them, behind them. They're very vulnerable, so they'll watch until there's no more sign of any of us, and then they all clamber down at once, and it's a race to get to the fish guts, and boom, 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 they gobble it all up in 2 minutes, and then they're gone. And then that was my kids we were all just blown away, and then just a simple skillet with some butter and a little bit of salt and some fresh baked bread, and that was one of the best shoreside meals I've ever had in my life. 24 perch fed the whole family.
And they are great to eat. Crappie is a fish that I have yet to try. I've heard nothing but glorious things. They said, Scotty, if you like walleye, you can wait till you try crappie. It is absolutely delicious. So in terms of table fare, panfish are extremely desirable for that reason. Not to mention the fact before we went on, the price of perch right now, holy smokes.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Like it's like a good steak almost now, a good 15-20 bucks a pound up there. It's amazing if we weighed all the fish we caught, and then we looked at how much money it would cost to buy that much fish in the grocery store or the fish market, we would be our spouses probably chase us out of the house going, what the heck are you doing? How come you're not contributing to the household budget here and some food security by bringing home some more fish once in a while? Salmon, $20-$25 a pound, walleye, $15-$20 a pound, right? It's amazing the value of these fish, and yet we love them, and for them we release many of them and we keep some, and that just shows this. We love to fish, and we also love fish, and I think it's sort of this yin yang relationship. It's some people say, well, you're conflicted. 1 minute you want to go catch them, next minute you're making sure they go back alive and you're taking care of them. But life is like that, right? Life is like full of contradictions, and it's not wrong. It's just life.
Amen. And Jeremy brings up a great point here, and I alluded to it when we were talking to Jim. Panfish are basically like they are the entry level of fishing. I learned with panfish, sunfish, rock bass, as Jeremy mentioned, are very delicious, but it's usually looked down upon. I don't want to say like they're a garbage fish by any means, but panfish, because they're just so plentiful, and it's like basically an entry level type fish. Everybody wants to go now for the bass, for the pike, for the walleye. But there are people that dedicate a lot of their angling time to targeting panfish, and they do so because of the intricacies, and it's basically microfishing. You're getting into microfishing, which is a whole different aspect of fishing if you haven't already done it.
It's ultralight, and if you're going to go that way, it is a sport in itself for sure. And I use 5 foot long ultralight rods with 2 pound test line and very small 500 size reels, and I enjoy it. But and that is a sport. That is a sport for sure. When you can catch panfish and get them to the boat with that light line and very micro sized jigs and things like that, little tungsten jigs and smaller, it's a sport. But I tell you what, the other thing, it's a confidence building fish. Like when I'm up at the CNIB Lake Joseph summer camp for Deaf Blind Week, I bring all my guests first to these old cribs that are from a train trestle, and they catch panfish just right below the boat, just to get the feel, just to give them the said, hey, I can catch fish, right? And it's probably many of them. They only go fishing once a year with me.
Wow.
And they catch their fish, they get their grin on, and they're happy. And I say, everyone catches 2 or 3 fish. And I said, okay, we're done here. Everyone's ready. Let's go get some bigger ones now. And then we go drop shotting for smallmouth bass. And then once we've got a few of those, we go jigging for lake trout. Everything vertical. No one has to cast. That's nice when you got 3 or 4 people fishing in a boat and they're all blind. It's just safer that way, and way less untangling things. When lines and rods get crossed. So it's. I think panfish are a confidence builder, and I think we need to, when we take our grandchildren or children out to catch panfish at the end of a dock, we don't need to catch them all. We don't need to catch them all every time from under a raft. You get the confidence. You teach them how to handle fish, how to catch fish, how to set the hook. You teach them these skills on these confidence building fish, and then you say, okay, we're done here. Let's go and see what else we can catch now. And then they've got the confidence and they'll be a little more patient because it's not like they haven't caught a fish yet. And then you can go do it.
It's true. Like when it comes to panfish, they are definitely the gateway. I don't want to say drug, but they're the gateway to getting into angling when it comes to larger species of fish. But I'm interested, before we get to Steve Moretti's comment, because that's an awesome comment that he's made. When it comes to panfish, when I fish for panfish, I'm really dependent on my sight. What is important in your world when it comes to panfishing? Obviously, it's feel.
Yes.
How do you make up for the lack of sight because to me it's very imperative when it comes to panfish? For
sure. When I'm fishing floats, I will always be moving my float back towards me. Right? I'm not fishing stationary. I'm throwing it out and I'm bringing it back slowly. So when that float goes down, I use a float that's just big enough to hold my rig up, because I want that float to go under as soon as there's any sort of reaction to that bait whatsoever. I don't want the float to set the hook. I don't want the float to hold everything up out of the water no matter what happens. I use the smallest float possible. I throw it out, and then I bring it back very slowly. And that way it's keeping it just in that, perfect strike zone, but I'm also covering some territory with it. And I'm feeling that bite as it happens. And then, things like 4-pound and 2-pound braid line it's non-stretch. It's very good. But, normally if you're fishing, quite often with panfish, you're only fishing with 10, 15 feet of line anyways. Whether the line stretches or not is not really an issue at that point. But a good graphite rod is imperative. A good sensitive graphite rod. You see some of these panfish rods, and they're really just absolutely loopy noodles, right? They, you whip them and they're doing 360s. The tip's doing a 360 on you. You're not going to feel anything with that big shock absorber rubber band fishing rod. I mean, they've got their purpose, but you really need a rod that's light and sensitive and flexible, but recovers quick and doesn't just bing bong boing bing bong, back and forth 100 times every time you cast it. You cast and the rod loads, unloads, and returns to its straight position immediately. Even with ultralight, even with 2-pound tests, that's what you're looking for in a rod. So you have that sensitivity coming up the line, down the rod to your hand.
Interesting. Well, it makes perfect sense. And I've got to ask the question for you, Lawrence. For us who have our sight, have the ability to switch up. When you go to a body of water and you're targeting panfish, you're going to already have a couple rods already rigged up.
Yeah.
What are your go-tos when it comes to panfish?
I drop shot for panfish. So that's if it's spawning, if the fish are still around nests and in shallow water, very effective, right? You can fish, you're fishing in 1.5 feet, 2 feet of water sometimes. A float doesn't really make sense at that point, but a nice little drop shot rig with a size 14 or size 16 circle hook, it's perfect. And a little tiny 1/16 ounce weight, that's perfect. It's all you need. I like the little spinner kind of baits. I love catching them on little zero mepses and smaller type spinners, little reaction bites, so you can cover some territory. And then I have a float setup, like I said, with a float that I can peg, that I can move up and down to adjust the line, the depth, so I can get into that perfect zone. And so I have three. Those are my three sets: a reaction, a variable float, and a drop shot.
It's awesome. Jeremy, yes, absolutely. Keep a finger on the line. You can pretty much feel anything as long as you have that kind of contact. I want to go back to what Steve Moretti, because at the beginning we kind of started with, is it really, do we really need 50 perch? As Steve has mentioned,
Wow.
he says, I think the question of do we need 50 perch is not a simple yes or no. I would agree with you, Steve. I think different water requires different limits. Look at Simcoe, for instance, and the amount of stunted perch. I don't know if they're stunted necessarily, but there are a lot of small perch. You don't see the jumbos coming out of Simcoe like we used to.
St. Lawrence, same thing.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Lake Erie seems to be up in arms, and it was interesting. Jay Barnucz, who's going to be coming on here after, sent me what it's great news if you're a walleye fan. Not so much if you're a perch, but in that synopsis, they said it was the 5th best walleye hatch in Lake Erie last year. 5th world record, off the charts. 5th best hatch they've had since they've been collecting data. But
5 years in a row almost.
5 years in a row. And the best 3 years, I think, were in the last 5 years. But interesting enough as it is, right at the bottom of that report, it says they're going to be coming out with the perch synopsis. And I'm really going to pay attention to where we're at with the perch, because a lot of folks would suggest that the perch aren't doing all that well in Lake Erie. So in terms of Simcoe and Lake Erie, yes, with less numbers, you're going to catch larger fish. With more numbers, obviously, you're going to see a lot smaller fish. So yes, it is a balance. As Jim said, selective harvest is certainly the answer, but we are, and Curtis says, we are the balance of good fishing worldwide, 100%.
Well, it could be like rabbits, like rabbits have an 11-year cycle where you have the population grows and grows and grows and grows, and then the 11th year the population just collapses, and then it starts over again. And nature is like that, right? Nature is in cycles. It's never holding still for anything. So understanding that, this is where anglers come in. Anglers understand these patterns because they fish the same bodies of water for many years and many generations. Scientists don't have that experience. Scientists have, they start their data with their first sampling, and then that's their baseline, and then every year they compare to that. But what happened to the scientists before them, or the scientists before them? Do they look at that data? Not. It's the big pitfall with science and fish monitoring is that it's not necessarily, they're not going backwards. The baseline always shifts with every new scientist. No offense to the scientists. Yeah. And there are some great scientists who fish as well, who understand this, but there's a lot of scientists, like the National Research Center just gave a big grant to teach junior scientists coming into into university fishing, because there's many people who want to get into fish science and marine and aquatic and all that stuff, but they don't know anything about fishing. And so they're teaching them how to fish and what fishing is all about, because they need to understand this, why you're doing this, how to go out and sample fish and catch fish, and be able to talk to anglers with knowledge so that you can start to understand these patterns and how everything's always shifting, and not all of a sudden assume that the population's in crisis every time the fish school moves to another part of the lake. Things happen. Weeds grow in an area. So you can't grow the same crop on the same ground 5 years in a row. The same is true underwater. After 4 or 5 years, that weed that the perch really loved in that area stops growing because it can't, the nutrients at the bottom of the lake there can't support that type of weed anymore. And so it just stops reproducing, and then something else grows in its place, and the fish move to some other part of the lake where they have their favorite weeds. So there's always these kinds of changes happening. And I'm not saying that we're not running out of panfish. I mean, the Americans have fished many of their best panfish lakes to pieces. And that's why it's so popular to come up here, because we have really good panfish populations. And that's why we have these 50 fish limits. It used to be 250, and then they brought it down to 50. But they still come, and they catch them and clean them and bring them home because they love their panfish. They love to eat them, and they catch as many as they're legally allowed to. Do we need to, have that 50 fish limit for all of us? Are we filling our freezers with panfish? I mean, we have many other great fishing opportunities. We don't need to fill our freezers with panfish.
And as Jay will mention to you, the good reason why these quotas are still as high as they are is of course for our outfitters. Just as you mentioned and alluded to, the number of Americans that cross the border. If we were to lower it, they may not spend their money up here like they used to. So it is a double-edged sword. It's a slippery slope. And but when it comes to tourism dollars, keeping the limits where they are is attractive for our American colleagues. But at the end of the day, perhaps maybe a different license should be introduced for folks that are coming across the border to fish these fish. And
non-residents and and in the end, the outfitters don't own the fish, right? They're public property. They belong to all of us. So we all have a stake in this game. And we all can speak out. I mean, look, there's a lake near here which has got pumpkin seeds in it galore, and it was so bad 25 years ago. They had a big fishing tournament, and the team that caught the most won. There was no limits back then, and they had 45-gallon barrels set up everywhere, and they caught many barrels of fish during this one-day tournament. And a few years later, the walleye and the bass population surged because they were being suppressed by the oversupply of pumpkin seed in this lake. And it's again at that point where we have way too many pumpkin seeds in this lake, and you can see the bass and the walleye population dropping off. So it's these cycles, right?
It is, and we're so glad to have folks like Jay and other biologists, marine biologists, doing their work out there to make sure that we are on par with what we consider our justifiable limits for our fish. Because as I said, if you just arbitrarily stroke everything with one brush, as Steve Moretti has mentioned, it's not the same for every body of water. You cannot do that.
No, every lake is different. Every lake is in a different stage of transition. So, you've got to, I think we're getting there much more so. We're learning how to treat each closed ecosystem as an independent closed ecosystem and give it special regulations and adjust those as we go. But, it can't be like what Gord Pizer calls, pulse fishing, where we all just go to a lake because we hear it's got a great, bite on.
Yeah.
And we hear it through the grapevine, and then we fish it hard for a year, and maybe the next year we go back and it's half as good as it was the year before, and then we go back the third year and it's not nearly as good. But then we hear about another lake and we all switch, and then no one goes back to that first lake for a couple 3 years until someone goes back there and says, holy mackerel, I was back on that lake and it's hot. And then it starts all over again, right? We pulse, and that's our strongest regulatory measure that we use at this point, because the regulations don't switch that fast. They don't adjust to meet these pressures. We adjust because we want to go somewhere where we can catch fish, and we have opportunities to do so in Canada because we're very fortunate. But at some point, around cities and an easy drive out from the city and back again, that doesn't work so much, because people who drive out of the city and want to go home that same day, they're limited to the bodies of water surrounding that city. With 1 million people, 500,000 people, that's a lot of fishing pressure that's, applied year after year after year. I think if we want to do something, there's where we need to sort of adjust fishing limits to reflect that level of pressure around urban centers.
Yeah, no, 100%. Some great comments coming up here too. I want to ask you this question, Steve Moretti. I'm going to ask Jay as well. When I think of panfish, I think of when I was 5, and it got me, into fishing. It kept me preoccupied. They were easy to catch. So that is one thing. And of course, the stigma of ice fishing. It always comes to mind when I think of panfish. I attribute the two together. However, Steve asked an interesting question, and it might change things when it comes to how we pursue these in the winter. But in your opinion, Lawrence, do you think panfish should have a season to protect spawning fish? And it's a good question in the sense that, when we are out panfishing and we do catch a feed and we bring it home, it's disturbing when you cut them open how many are full of eggs.
Yeah. I think some of these panfish, and ask Jason this, I think some of them spawn a couple times a year, which makes it a little trickier, right? And but Jason would know better about that. But I think if you want to target panfish and you're going to do it on micro-sized tackle, and you're going to do catch and release, number one, you got to do it at depths that are reasonable, because there's way too many fish being killed, when they're caught deep and brought to the surface and then released, and they just can't get back down from bear trauma. And we kill too many fish with big barbed hooks. Look, we were teaching a fishing class here to city kids. We had 3 weeks of fishing classes here in Ottawa, and the kids learned to fish on this little lake in the middle of Ottawa with circle hooks and drop shot and floats. And they started with panfish with tiny circle hooks, and they learned how to catch panfish on circle hooks. And those things never go down the gullet. They never get them hooked in the throat. I mean, nothing can turn a kid off fishing when you have to start, going in there with big pliers and tugging on the hook, and, and the fish is struggling and the eyes are bulging. You want to bring these kids into the fishing community, teach them how to use circle hooks. And it's so much more sustainable when you let these fish go, and you're teaching these kids these good practices. So, get the right size tackle if you're going to pursue panfish because you're bored and because you enjoy it and there's something to do and they're biting and you know where they are and it's just something to do. Use the right tackle, and it's much more sustainable than, especially with crappie. I mean, they call them paper mouths for a reason, right? You start take the barbs off, you're not going to tear up their mouths like you do with some of these bigger barbed hooks. And who cares if one or two gets away? Who cares?
100%. Lawrence, as always, buddy, you bring a wealth of information and knowledge to us each Monday. Look forward to this segment every week. Can't thank you enough. What have you got in store this week?
Well, muskie fishing.
Yeah.
Not stopping, man. Not stopping. And soon we'll be walleye fishing, because I'm giving it away here, but it's starting to come when the water drops down into the 50s, low 50s, that walleye start to feed more actively in the late days in shallow, because they're putting on the feed bag. And that's late November, early December. And I'm looking forward to that coming up soon. And that's great fishing. That's great fishing.
Yes. You took the words right out of my mouth, dude. Well, in the meantime, bud, you stay safe, stay classy, and thanks as always for doing this, my brother.
Appreciate the opportunity, you guys, and thanks, Scotty. Keep up the great work, my friend.
Thanks, dude. Appreciate it. Have a good night.
You too.
Oh, I tell you, we could go on and on. It's a wonder how we are able to keep these segments to under, well, not an hour tonight, but an hour and a half. Some great points here. George Morgan, I'm definitely going to be looking at that article that you said about Minnesota. Yeah, it's strange what goes down in our states when fishing is it's the go-to sport for the outdoors. Hunting is obviously as well, but it's a shame to hear that a class or a species of fish is not doing well for our American cousins. In the meantime, before we bring in our next guest, last but not least, Jay Barnucz, here's a message from his sponsor.
Want to know the difference between power bait and other soft plastics? Ask the fish. Berkeley scientists have thousands of flavors tested on thousands of fish. Natural, man-made, every bait that's ever hit the water. No matter the shape, size, or color, power bait is the only one that is scientifically proven. Fish bite and will not let go.
J-Dog, how you doing, my friend?
Good, Scotty. How are you doing?
Good, buddy. Good. Well, you know what? I would say if there was a topic of conversation, this is your forte, dude. There's a lot of great comments that are coming up here and questions as well. But I have to ask you that question. You talk about, you made a comment here. It's hard to believe that only 15 to 20 years ago, there were almost no limits on panfish.
Yeah.
And Jay, I remember those days. I remember being out on Simcoe and watching, the UPS trucks, all these courier companies showing up at the end of the roads. And I could never understand why. till someone explained to me that they're literally fishing, putting them in boxes and then sending them back home. And it puzzled me to think we're going to run out. Like Lake Simcoe is a big body of water, but at some point we keep up this operation, we're going to run out.
In the summer of 1995, I was working on Rice Lake doing creel survey, and one of my jobs, and I did this again in 2001. So 95 and 2000, or I think it was 2 years. Yeah, those 2 years. And when I was on those bodies of water, Scotty, on Rice Lake both times, they did a 5-year cycle. So one of my jobs was to sit by the fish cleaning huts at Southview Cottages, and there was another one. And I sat there and I took scale samples from bluegills and pumpkin seeds that were coming, and crappie that were coming in. And I met U.S. anglers who were coming up to these cottages. Let's say there were 6 anglers. They'd only have 2 boats. Two boats would go out in the morning, 4 anglers, 2 would stay behind. At lunch, the 2 who stayed behind would go out, and 2 of the 4 would stay back and start cleaning fish. And they'd have those tumblers, those descalers, right? And they would just start cleaning fish, man. And they would clean fish every day for the entire week. And they would take home hundreds of panfish each. Hundreds. Like, they'd have these, remember the old GMC safari vans? Remember those? Okay. They'd be full. The coolers would be packed with panfish. I never experienced what happened on Lake Simcoe like others have, but I saw that on Rice Lake firsthand. So, and panfish don't live, like, they live pretty long time. Like, even a large bluegill, you're talking, they don't become sexually mature till 4 to 7 years of age.
Oh, wow. I didn't know it was that.
So these big bluegills are probably pushing 10 years old. So there's only a couple generations of fish, Scotty, since we put the limits in, right? Because it takes so long for these to change. Now, there's actually a really good article, and I'm gonna put it in the comments because I think it's really important everybody reads it, and we could do an entire show on this article from End Fisherman. But it touches on a lot of different topics. Steve mentioned in the comments about protective seasons for panfish. It's actually suggested in that article, and it's referencing scientific information, that the best time to protect panfish is to not allow ice fishing. It's not during the spawn, because once panfish are spawning in the spring, so bluegill in southern Ontario and central Ontario, they spawn starting in late May into late June, depends on the year and the latitude. We're fishing for walleye, channel cats. Like, the panfish season falls within a whole bunch of other species in the spring. But it's ice fishing where I think they get harvested the most. I believe that, and I've seen that on our lakes in Ontario. I think that's where it's on Simcoe. I think the Kawartha is to a point, but on most of the lakes around here too, ice fishing hits them hard.
It does, and I'll tell you, it discourages me from wanting to target the fish, because it just seems like every time you pull the perch up and you'd fillet it, it just have a massive aches. And as an angler who loves fish, as much as I love to eat fish, I don't know, it's discouraging to see that, because you're taking away that circle of life. But I agree. Like, in terms of it being an entry-level fish and getting a lot of folks confident in fishing, whether they're young or old, I always seem to attribute panfish to ice fishing. And unfortunately, I have to agree. I think they're most vulnerable at that time, not so much at spawn.
Yeah, I agree.
But interesting. Here's another question for you from Steve. Do you think hut operators for perch, especially on Simcoe, place or restrict their huts to shallower water? We estimate approximately 75 perch average per person, with less than 10% keepers in 40 feet of water. That's a huge amount of fish that won't survive.
Yeah, that's a good question, Steve, and a good comment there too, because Yeah, I'd have to ask the hut operators on Simcoe what they think about that. I know that when we go out, so if I do visit Simcoe, because I only go to Lake Simcoe probably 3 to 4 times a year, because most of the areas I want to fish for perch on Simcoe are a good 2.5 hours from my house. So I'm not going to go there regularly. And when I go to target big fish. I don't care about numbers. If I happen to trip over half a pail of decent sized perch, I'm happy with it. I'm after big ones, 12 inches, 13 inches and bigger. But a lot of those fish come out of deeper water, and I know that. So, basically, if I bring them up, I send them right back down. I don't even catch that many, to be honest. I'm just targeting the bigger ones. But that's a good point, Steve, about, when you go to Lake Simcoe, a lot of anglers are catching those 6, not even 6, like 4 to 7 inch perch that aren't really worth keeping. I think a perch is pretty hard to clean unless you're pretty agile with your fingers, which I am not. I'd say, Scotty, like 8 inches is probably anything under 8 inches is pretty hard to get any decent meat off unless you're pretty handy with a knife, So yeah, I agree. I think there could be a mortality issue with those fish coming out of that deeper water. Now, I also find that a lot of hut operators don't put their huts out that deep unless they really have to. Because the further out they put the huts, the further they have to travel to their huts. And I know that there's kind of a migration of huts on the way out, but I do agree that I've seen that happen on Simcoe. I've even seen that happen on Nipissing, where the hut operators are trying to find as many walleye as they can. And in the last few years, a lot of operators are going out quite deep. Yeah. And I've only been there a couple times in the last few years, but talking with a lot of my friends who spend time up there, those huts are out really far. I'm surprised how deep they're fishing for some of these walleye. And there might be a mortality issue with some of these smaller fish going back down to those depths. That's a really interesting point, Steve.
And of course, slot size also has a lot of issue up on Nipissing as well, because it is very, very restrictive to the angler when it comes to trying to target and keep a keeper fish. It's not easy. I spent a day up there with Christina and Tracy and his father, and it was hard. It was hard to get. We caught over 100. I think it was close to 100 fish. But one keeper, one keeper. That's a lot of hours and a lot of fish.
Yeah, it is.
Actually, might not be able to survive. This is, I think, one of the most common questions. Curtis, thanks so much for asking this, but it is bang on. It's a little bit easier when it comes to bluegill, but when it comes to panfish, how can you figure out the sex of a small fish, or is there an app or website for this type of question?
Yeah, that's a good question, Curtis. So there's kind of an easy way to answer this. Don't fish for them when they're on their beds. Okay? Because it's always the males that guard the nests. Mm-hmm. So if we want to keep smaller fish, we don't, how should I put this? Because it's always relative based on the body of water, but might want to keep some fish to eat. So set the bar where you feel it should be set. There's belief that there should be slot limits on panfish, just like there's slot limits on walleye and other species, where any fish over a certain size should be released right away. I believe that in Southern Ontario, where we have the biggest bluegills, and I'll include Central Ontario. For me, just so anyone out there, anything south of Algonquin Park is Southern Ontario. Okay, so even though I live where I live, anything that's south of Algonquin is considered south to me. The panfish that are over like 8 inches is probably as big of a bluegill as you want to keep, maybe 8.5. Anything bigger than that, you got to let it go. And whether it's a male or a female, I think you're doing the population a disservice if you're keeping them bigger than 8 inches. There's plenty of meat on an 8-inch or 7.5-inch bluegill. And Jim made a good point earlier. Not very many people actually measure their panfish. They think it's big or it's small, but actually take a ruler with you. Like I guess because of what I like to do, what I do for a living, but I'm always measuring things. I don't trust my own guessing. I know that on my hand, like I know from here to here, tip of pinky to tip of thumb, that is 9 inches. I know that. And I've measured a lot of fish doing that count. So that's my perfect slot size panfish. If it's over that, it's definitely going back. But yeah, anglers should get in the habit of measuring their fish to really get a handle on what they're releasing. I'm just looking here. George Morgan put a link here, and yeah, this is I've actually read this before. If you really want to hear about some of the happenings with yellow perch on Lake Nipissing, and I know a lot of the viewers visit Nipissing. A lot of CFNers regularly visit Lake Nipissing. You know, they have such incredible fisheries information, and George is a real flag waver for that lake. And I'm glad he is, because I've learned so much about the fishery, the fishery in Lake Nipissing, and I say the fishery for all species. And they have such a great, they have a fisheries assessment unit there that M&R runs, and they have such great information coming out of Nipissing and such good data that they can actually put together publications like this. So that's a great publication. So everyone should click on that. And that's what's great about this show, Scotty, is I go back through all the links too. Like if people share stuff, I love going back. So thanks for sharing that, George. That's great.
Absolutely. That one that he posted about the Minnesota perch, I'm looking forward to reading that. That looks really interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, in terms of figuring out the sex of a fish without spending a lot of time in school like you did, or having to get a master's in whatever, is there anything out there for people to go to, an app? Obviously, pictures are great.
Yeah, not really. Like, you know what, Scotty? Like, okay, during, yellow perch, unless it's actually putting sperm on you. Okay, we've all been through that in the spring perch fishing, or spitting eggs on you. That's about the only way you can tell. You can guess based on some of the larger, fatter fish are usually the females, but it's hard to tell. With bluegill and pumpkin seed, even during, and I'm thinking in ice fishing when we're catching a lot of panfish, a lot of these fish are the same color, between males and females. It's only in the spring you get this dichotomy in color where the males are typically darker in color. So their blues are bluer, their blacks are blacker, their reds are redder, depending on pumpkin seed or bluegill. Even the male crappies tend to get pretty dark, but not always. There's no rule to it. So unfortunately, the only way, Curtis, to really get down to it is just practice your selective harvest. Don't go overboard with harvesting fish. And you'll find that, and keep track of some of the fish that you clean, and are they male or female? But typically it's really hard to tell fish apart between male and female. It's really tricky. There's no set way to do it. But at least with panfish, color patterns can vary quite a bit between males and females at certain times of the year. And in fact, that's one of the few groups of species that does that, except for some of the tiny minnow species, which a lot of us aren't out to catch recreationally. There is a lot of sexual dimorphism between males and females, but we're talking like rosy face shiners, striped shiners, common shiners, horny head chub. If you're like a Kenneth, okay, he's all over that, and those fish shop folks that are listening, you're all over this information. But for the average angler that's out there capturing sport fish, you're not going to look at those minnows.
What a difference too. You speak of that in the springtime when it's spawning time.
Yeah.
Fathead minnows. You could not tell the difference. As soon as spring comes along, they stick out like sore thumbs, the males do.
One species that's really cool to me is Johnny Darter. So Johnny Darters, the males get like blue and purple. Like it's almost like, is this even a Johnny Darter? Like they're so unique colored when they're spawning. So many small species of fish do that. But the larger game fish, they're pretty boring, man. Like, let's be honest, like they're kind of bland. It depends what you're into, man. I like a little bit of flash.
100%.
I'm always a little bit of flash.
Ken Nicholas has an interesting comment here, and some would agree 100% with him. Crappie fishing during the winter should be limited to catch and keep only. Catch and release from these deeper layers will result in their death. So catch and release anglers, stop targeting crappie in winter. You are just killing them.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
It is.
Ken, I think it depends on what lakes you're fishing, because a lot of lakes I fish around here, I'm fishing in less than 15 feet of water for crappie. I'm targeting them within weed beds in small kettle lakes and small reservoirs. And so I'm not worried about mortality rates in those fish if I'm going to release them. But if you go up to the shield lakes, so in the Perry Sound area, Muskoka area, even up through the, there's crappie lakes up through Halliburton, Bancroft areas. Those fish are coming out of 30 to 50 feet of water, and it's not easy on them at all. And so it's really the type of lake that I'd be more concerned with. Of course, if you're going to pull it out of, with any fish, Scotty, like we've talked about this with the winter fish off, you pull a fish out, it's minus 20 out, its eyeballs will freeze in seconds, right? Like if we're in a heated shelter, it's different. So fish care is always of the utmost importance if you're going to be releasing fish. So I wouldn't say necessarily catch and keep, but definitely got to be careful of catching crappie out of deep water.
I agree 100%. Great comment, Ken. Thanks for that. Corey brought up something that I never thought of, but I'll pass on to you. If you got a lake that is overrun with yellow perch, it doesn't matter if it's in the United States or Canada. There goes your bluegill population and your crappies population on these two species. Fish will go downhill. It's best to catch as many yellow perch as you can to keep balance in the lake.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, in the Great Lakes Basin, yellow perch, bluegill, pumpkin seed, black crappie, white crappie, green sunfish, northern sunfish, all these species, they've coexisted for thousands of years in this area. I'm talking southern Ontario. So draw that line across Algonquin Park and south, where a lot of these species they're not native to all the lakes in those areas, but definitely if you get, Scotty, like you get down out of the Trent system, Rideau system, especially down southwest, all those species have coexisted for a millennia or longer, well, since glacial times. And so they should be able to balance themselves out. In saying that, some of these species are a pain in the neck when they get into inland lakes where they're not supposed to be there. I was fishing in some backcountry lakes this summer in Algonquin, and what is the number one forage item for lake trout? Yellow perch. Dude, yellow perch in this lake. And I'm 1,000 miles from nowhere, and I'm catching lake trout, and we're eating some Lakers for our dinner, and their bellies are full of yellow perch. And some Cisco, there are some Cisco in the lake we are in, but mostly yellow perch. And the number one fish catcher was, I don't have them up here, but it was a jointed perch colored crankbait. That was the number one fish catcher. Can you believe it? You're in a lake trout lake in the middle of God's country, and I'm dragging a yellow perch bait to catch the most lake trout. They didn't want my shiny Cisco looking bait. They wanted my yellow perch bait. That's amazing.
It is, but it goes to show the importance of thinking outside the box. And at the end of the day, if you are keeping fish, I do this all the time. Check the guts, check the stomachs, see what it is that they're eating. Sometimes you'll be amazed at what you find. I'm amazed all the time to find, especially with walleye, the amount of invertebrates that they eat. Like it's amazing to me, the bugs that eat. We throw everything that looks like a minnow. Meanwhile, most of these fish are eating nothing but bugs. But yeah, no, absolutely, think outside the box.
But hey, to Corey's point though, in lakes where they're not native, any of these species we're talking about, they can be a problem. They can be a real problem.
100%.
And so, make sure you speak to your local resource managers to talk about, is there anything we can do on certain lakes? Because yellow perch can be a problem. If George is still listening, I don't want to bring up the dreaded rock bass, because they're little Satans, man. They're like little satanic fish that ruin everything. I love catching rock bass, and if Stephanie heard me talking right now, she'd be throwing stuff at me, especially on her CFN custom rod, man. that rod's caught more rock bass than you can imagine. But I'm going to tell you, like those fish, when they get into, they really muck things up. If the ecology of some lakes, right? So, yeah, rock bass. Yeah, you know what's that old skit? You know what's that?
What's that?
Rock bass. That was me, Trevor, the Retrowskis last winter.
That's hilarious.
Catching rock, dude. It was a long day. It was a long day. Not a lot of fish were caught, and we started catching rock bass. So that's what happened. So
incredible.
There you go. Rock bass are the fish of the future for most southern Ontario lakes. There you go. George called it.
We can only hope.
George, I know some kids out there and a few friends that are okay with that, but ecologically, that's not a good thing.
You know, and it's funny because things that we thought about as kids. I mean, as a kid growing up, I loved rock bass. You know what? Rock bass always seemed to turn on for me. I never had a problem catching them. There was a confidence bait or a confidence fish for me. Loved it. And then as you grow older and read up on some of this stuff, 100%, I had no idea how devastating rock bass can be. Meanwhile, you know, I just thought they were my heroes because they would be the only fish that would bite.
You know, I'm as guilty as the next person, but we need to have more people eating rock bass. It needs to happen. And some of the rock bass we catch in these like central Ontario lakes, like where we cottage up in Barry's Bay, dude, these are like legitimate half pound, 2/3 pound, 3/4 pound rock bass. Some of these are giants. Like, why are we not eating them? That's what we should be eating is rock bass. Like it's again, it brings us back to keeping things in check and balance. And one thing we're guilty of, Scotty, we brought it up on the show before, and we've discussed this at length, is we don't keep enough fish sometimes. Like, you know, we are the top predators on some of these lakes. And if we don't help to keep things in check, unfortunately, we tend to go too far the other way, but there is a good side to eating fish too.
Yes, there is. And I say it with a nervous reluctance that I agree with you. I certainly wouldn't want to open up the gauntlet for a whole bunch of people to go out and fill their boots. Yeah, you're right. Because back in the day, you know, when catch and release was like, you just didn't even think about it. And we're talking like late 80s, early 90s that catch and release really started to, you know, take shape and take on its own aura. But yeah, rock bass, I do remember eating quite a few of them as a kid because the lake that we grew up on, it was inundated with them, and they were tasty.
Yeah, I'm telling you, man, it's something that maybe we should think about more in some of these lakes that could use a little bit of a boost. Especially, you know, I'm spoiled where I am, like living basically on Lake Erie. So all these species coexist really well. But I know that on some of the inland lakes in Ontario, where you have a very much a finite space, you know, these interactions with different species can take on a whole different meaning.
Well, we are now being it's a suggestion made by a couple folks here that we need to do a CFN cook-off that includes rock bass.
Well, maybe we got to talk to Cameron. We got to do a rock bass cook-off. All right.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah.
What's in store for you in the upcoming week, Jay?
You know what? I was just wanted to touch on a couple panfish things if I could before we jump into what I'm up to. Jim had some wonderful comments, and you know, I love panfish fishing like Jim does, and that's partly why the show got sidetracked before we start, because sometimes we get talking about stuff, we just can't stop.
Amen.
But I wanted to talk a couple things about setups that Jim touched on, and I just want to add to it a little bit because he was really getting at some of there's so many great baits that we can use, but sometimes what we do is we don't use the bait properly, right? So, you know, and fishing is like this for a lot of different techniques out there, but I'm going to show you a couple things. So these are a couple of baits that I like to use. That's called a Johnson Shiver Shad, but I want you to notice the hook, that jig head. That's a 1/64 ounce jig head. No, sorry, that's 1/32, and this one's 1/64. And to be honest, a lot of anglers will put too big of a jig head in that bait. See how that little shad tail there goes back and forth? That's actually a small swim bait. I'm going to drop a link here in the chat for those baits. That swim bait's called a shad swimmer, and they're actually made by Johnson, who makes Crappie Buster baits, but you can buy them through an Ontario supplier, tackledepot.ca. They have great selection. And what I like about these Johnson baits is they're super cheap. But again, you got to match that jig head. So there's so many great suppliers out there, and there's so many great jig suppliers in the CFN family. I don't even know where to start.
Amen.
But I'm going to tell you right now, make sure you try and find some that are probably in that 1/64th ounce, 1/32nd, maybe 1/16th. That's it. Okay. Now you get up to 1/16th. Here's the trick. Does anyone know what 1/16th weighs in grams? Anyone?
No idea.
5 grams.
Is it really? Wow.
Yeah. I'm gonna put some numbers here in the chat. Dude, I do this math in my head all the time. And I'll tell you why.
I'm glad you do.
Well, actually, no, I won't post. I'll share that another time. But so here's the thing, Scotty. This is what's this? This is that's a 3 gram float. Okay. It's perfect with a 1/16th ounce jig. A 1/16th ounce jig, that float will sit with the water line right there. Okay. If I want to go to a 1/32nd, I got to go to a 2 gram float. You have to figure out what floats best fit the baits that you're going to use. Why is that so important? And Jim talked about this. You want that float to go under easily. And now this is a balsa float. It's actually made by, and I've talked about these guys before on here, Cool Water Fishing, another great Ontario company. Paul makes balsa floats for steelhead and panfish. I buy all my floats from Paul. They are absolutely phenomenal floats. And I love these little balsa ones. One thing that balsa does for anglers is they're really durable and they cast further than plastic because balsa is actually a little more dense. And so they actually cast further and will hold up more weight than plastic. But the trick is what I've done experimentation at home. Rig it up on a short line and check which floats line up with which baits. Okay. The other trick I'm going to show you guys, and I brought this on before, is that little beetle spin.
Yep.
That little beetle spin. Now, I'm not just talking panfish here, but like panfish for sure. But man, you can make a little swim bait like that into an awesome search bait with that beetle spin and catch big panfish, walleye. This year in the fish off, Trevor caught probably, let's see, we finished in 9th, I think, with 24 species. I'm going to say he caught half our species on a beetle spin with all different types of trailers.
Boom.
Like it was unbelievable because we caught white perch, white bass, pumpkin seed, crappie on that little beetle spin. And because it's heavier, you can cast it further and retrieve it as opposed to just casting out that plain jig head with a little swim bait. So just a couple quick panfish tips. Oh, and my favorite panfish bait, if you can find them, come on.
Gulp. I see gulp. Yeah.
Wax worms. 1 inch gulp minnows. 1 inch.
1 inch gulp minnows.
1 inch gulp minnows. And I'll use them through the ice. I'll use them open water. They are just my favorite bait to use. They're a little messy, but they catch fish. And man, I can't say enough about gulp. It is sloppy to use, but I love those gulp minnows. And the 1 inch, up to 2 inch for panfish, but that 1 inch is just a great bait because when we start fishing under the ice, Scotty, we start really downsizing, and the 1 inch one really gets them under the ice too. And for perch, crappie, bluegill, doesn't matter. Just make sure you match it up with the smallest jig head you can get away with, because that will give the bait the most action for all these baits. You want a little bit of a hook, to hook those fish, but you definitely want to go with as small a hook as you can. That gives you the most action with that bait. So
great point. George, I love this comment because I actually remember this. And I don't believe the program was just on Dickey Lake. There was I think there was
Yeah.
a trifecta of lakes. There were 3 lakes that were included in this in the late 80s. And they did this to increase they were hoping they would decrease the population of rock bass. But what they did was they were targeting the larger fish, or that's what they were catching was the larger fish, which allowed the juvenile rock bass population to skyrocket. And I know Dickey was one of them. I can't remember the other 2, but there were 3 lakes that they did this on, and in all 3 of them, the population skyrocketed. Incredible.
Yeah, like George knows rock bass. Like, so George works on Lake Nipissing, and you know, he's one of the lead senior researchers there at the Lake Nipissing Fisheries Assessment Unit, and the man knows his rock bass, and especially in those central Ontario areas, like rock bass getting into these shield lakes, especially where they're not native. Boy, they are a real pain in the neck for fisheries managers. And that experiment at Dickey Lake, I remember reading about that as well. Like, it's not just taking them all out. It's about doing things in a sensible way, right? So selective harvest of them. Don't just take them all out. You know, and you have to harvest fish based on their own ecology. And, you know, so Scotty, like, you know, we talked about panfish tonight. Well, a lot of the literature out there suggests that the worst time to harvest panfish is in the wintertime. That's when we can take the most advantage of them because they're easiest to catch. That's when we should maybe have stricter limits during the winter than during the open water season, because in the open water season, there's lots of distractions, right, for other species. But for panfish in the ice, for some areas, that's all you're going to target is bluegill, pumpkin seed, crappie, and yellow perch, right? So, you know, it all depends on the species and what's happening in those lakes. And the challenge with lakes like the Dickey Lake project, those small lakes, they take on their own ecology, right? And it makes it really hard as managers, Scotty, because how do we manage each lake and we have these large fisheries management zones without making the regulations too complicated? It is really,
100%.
and I'm happy that I actually like the way the zones are. They're better than it used to be. There's still more work to be done, but you know, it's a tough challenge managing fisheries in Ontario because we have such a diversity of fisheries. Like, what is our blessing is also our curse.
100%. I was just going to say, are there 2 lakes the same?
No, I don't think so.
Exactly. They're all different. And
George says here, harvest by biodiversity. For example, if the bullheads are biting, harvest them instead of letting them go. That's true. Like, bullheads, people eat bullheads, man. Like, we're just cultured in a way that we don't eat certain things, but in some places they're happy to eat those things. You know, like, I have a personal hatred of bullhead because at work I have so many scars and bad stories about handling bullheads. They know how to get me, man. They get me all the time. But it's true. George, you make a great point.
100%. Well, Jay, as I asked before, what have you got upcoming this week?
Well, you know what? We got through last week with the warm weather. We went out Thursday night, Scotty. Took Trevor and Owen out in their kayaks, and I was the chaperone, as I always am. Not a bad job chaperoning a couple 13-year-old fish heads.
Yep.
They were catching bass on frogs in 68-degree water on October the 14th. Can you believe that?
Only because you're saying it.
Topwater bites. I was going out with a chatterbait, and I was pitching the chatterbait to the cane beds, and in 2 to 2.5 feet of water, and the largies were coming out from the undercut and rolling on the chatterbait. This isn't July, man. This was October the 14th. It was unbelievable. Just a fantastic day. And then all of a sudden, everything changed, right? So today I got to go to work this morning, and it was 7 degrees and damp and cold. So I think we're going to switch full gear to steelhead. I say think because I've tried. I've lost a couple in the past week, but the water's so darn high, Scotty. Like, this time last year, I was praying for water, and it seems like down where we are here, every 4 days we get another inch of rain. And that's not an exaggeration. I have a rain gauge at my grandmother's house down the street that I like to use. And we got another inch, almost 2 inches of rain Friday night, Saturday morning. So I've been trying to catch steelhead. I know they're running, but they're not running full bore yet down here because the water temps are still warm, still being the operative word, because that's going to change. So this weekend we're going to go for some steelhead, probably locally for one day, and then I might do a trip up to Lake Huron. I don't know, like, dude. Oh, and I'm done field work now, dude. I've done my field work. I can get back to more fishing, less field work.
Nice.
The tough part of being a field biologist is you get to do all this great, cool work, no fishing. So I got to get back to fishing.
Amen. Well,
yeah.
Hosting CFN does the similar thing. I can't wait to get back to fishing as well, Jay. But in the meantime, dude, thanks so much for all you do and all you bring to our community. Can't thank you enough, and I look forward to this every month. Yeah,
dude, we're never going to get the show under an hour. There's too many great comments, and tonight, thanks everyone for so many great comments coming in and keep the dialogue going. You guys keep the questions coming. We don't want to stop. We will stop at some point, but it makes it easier for us. Thank you very much.
100%. Thanks, Jay. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.
All the best. Well, as Jay alluded to, of course, it is steelhead season upcoming. And as I mentioned at the top, we do have a new contest that we are going to be starting tomorrow with North Shore Tackle. The good folks over there have given up a prize pack. And all you have to do is post either yourself holding a fish with the North Shore Tackle product in it. You could be wearing a hat, a shirt, anything. Videos are preferable. I'd love to see more videos. But as I said, pictures also count. So as I said, it's real simple. It could be something as simple as what Yakman is doing here, what Erica is doing here, or if you want to get creative, you can do something like this, which it incorporates a whole bunch of pictures. Whatever you guys want to do, we're going to be posting it tomorrow for Trout Tuesday. It is going to be steelhead season real soon. But in the meantime, I just want to congratulate all of our CFN retreaters who came up to Horwood this past season, caught some fish with some North Shore Tackle, and put together this incredible thank you video, because all of you who are in this video have already qualified for a ballot on the wheel. I'll leave you with that video, and I bid you all farewell. Thanks so much for joining us. As Jay said, thanks for all the great comments and questions. Keep them coming. In the meantime, love you all. Stay classy, and we'll talk to you real soon. Peace.
Good morning, out here on beautiful Horwood Lake using a drop shot, and on my bottom hook I got some awesome North Shore baits, and I caught this nice Walter. Yeah, he swallowed that bait. So I'm just gonna unhook this guy and get him back in the water. Yeah, baby.
An awful lot of fun at Horwood Lake Lodge fishing with North Shore baits. Thanks to North Shore Tackle, fishing Northern Ontario, getting great pike.
Thank you to North Shore Baits for this 20.5-inch pike this morning. Awesome baits. Thank you.
Hey folks, this is my walleye on Horwood Lake Lodge using our North Shore Tackle bait that was very kindly donated to the CFN retreat, and it's working really good.
Woof woof.
Woof woof. Carries on. We are at Horwood Lake Lodge for the CFN retreat, And he's got something on. We were trolling.
North Shore tackle.
That's what we're using today. Generously donated to us by North Shore Tackle. Where is he? Gone under the boat. Sneaky, sneaky, sneaky. Oh, it's a bass. Bring him in here. He's a nice one. Oh, he's got that white paddle tail from North Shore Tackle. And he doesn't like the net.
Rod, oh, holy snapping popcorn.
Oh, he's in the net. Awesome! You! Can you get him?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, there you go, folks. White paddle tail, North Shore Tackle. Did its job. Hang on to him, babe. There you go. Look at that. What a beauty.
He is a beauty.
Thank you very much, North Shore Baits. We got myself another bass. It was exciting. Thank you.
Got the doubleheader happening
on the North Shore Tackle Baits.
North Shore Tackle Baits
on at Horwood Lake Lodge.
And there's a snot rocket on a North Shore Tackle Pink.
Nice.
You caught one!
Oh, I got him.
One up for David from North Shore Tackle. That's on the Pink Nasty North Shore Tackle Baits. We usually use that for Lakers, but the pike up here love it.
And Steve, what'd you get your bass on?
Got the nice North Shore white swimmer.
3.5 inch.
Yeah, baby.
Thank you, Horwood Lake Lodge. Thank you to all the sponsors. We got more fish to catch. Catch you later.